While hosting a family dinner, my parents demanded I quit my job so as to finally grow up and join the family business. I laughed until my dad slammed his fork down and said, "We already sold your car to force you." My sister gasped, "You did what?" I looked at them both and whispered, "Then you better pray I don't sell your secrets too." Their smirks vanished instantly as I pulled out the folder. I should have known something was off the moment my parents walked into my apartment like they had just closed a business deal, calm, confident, and smug. My father, Walter Carter, scanned the place like he was appraising property, his sharp eyes moving over the furniture, the bookshelves, the open laptop on my desk. My mother, Diane, followed behind him with that perfectly poised smile, the kind she always wore when she was about to manipulate a conversation in her favor. Then there was my sister, Mira. She hesitated at the doorway before stepping in, clutching her purse like she wanted an excuse to leave at any moment. She shot me a look, one that told me she didn't want to be here any more than I wanted them to be. That was my first red flag. Still, I tried to push down my unease. I had invited them over for dinner. Stupidly, I had thought that maybe, just maybe, this could be a normal evening. A meal. A conversation. No demands, no ultimatums. Just family. That was my mistake. "Nice place," my father said, finally acknowledging me, though his tone made it clear he expected something more. "Good to see you too, Dad," I replied dryly. We sat down at the dining table, where I had put real effort into making a meal they would actually enjoy. Steak, roasted potatoes, some grilled vegetables. I had made an apple tart for dessert, Myra's favorite, not that our parents would care. The first 15 minutes were surprisingly civil. Mira talked about her photography work. I mentioned a few details about my latest investigation, carefully leaving out the specifics. My father, as always, turned every topic back to Carter and Company, the family law firm that had been in our name for generations. Then, right as I was about to take a bite of my steak, my father cleared his throat. "Jonas," he said, in that formal, no-nonsense tone that always preceded bad news. "It's time." I didn't even bother pretending I didn't know what he meant. "Time for what?" I asked anyway, setting down my fork. "To quit playing around and finally take your rightful place in the family business." I blinked at him. Then I let out a short, surprised laugh. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." I looked over at my mother, expecting her to at least attempt to soften the demand. She just sipped her wine and said, "We've let you chase this little journalism fantasy long enough." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "Unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. "This again? After all this time?" My father's expression didn't change. "You're my son. You're a Carter. And Carter men do not waste their lives writing stories about other people's problems." "Right," I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because exposing corruption and crime is such a waste of time." "Enough," he snapped. "You are done with this nonsense." I scoffed. "And what makes you think you have any say in my life?" And then, with a smirk that made my stomach drop, he delivered the blow. "We already sold your car." Silence. Mira was the first to react. She gasped, looking at them in shock. "You did what?" I stared at my father, not fully processing what he had just said. "You're joking." "You weren't using it responsibly," my mother chimed in, taking another sip of wine as if this was just another casual conversation. "You stole from me," I said, my voice low and controlled. "We handled it," my father corrected, his tone so dismissive it made my skin crawl. "You weren't making smart choices, so we made them for you." I swallowed down the anger that was rising in my throat. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "We are your parents," my mother said, as if that justified everything. "And it's time for you to start acting like an adult." For a long moment, I just stared at them. They really thought they could control me like this. They actually believed they still had power over me. Then, slowly, I smiled. They had no idea. I reached under the table and pulled out a thick, heavy folder. Their smirks vanished instantly. Mira looked between us, confused. "Jonas, what is that?" I didn't take my eyes off my parents as I set the folder on the table and slid it toward them. "Everything," I said simply. My father hesitated, then flipped the folder open. His face paled the moment he saw what was inside. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Confidential emails. Months' worth of research. Every dirty secret Carter and Company thought they had buried. I had it all. My father's fingers tightened around the edges of the folder as he flipped through the pages, his usually composed expression slipping into something I had never seen before: fear. My mother leaned over to glance at the documents, her hand frozen midair, the wine glass in her grip forgotten. Mira, still looking between us, finally reached forward to grab one of the pages. "What is this?" she murmured, scanning the document. Her eyes widened as she absorbed the details. This is financial fraud. My father's jaw clenched. He carefully closed the folder, placing both palms flat on the table. Where did you get this? His voice was calm, but it was the kind of forced calm that barely concealed rage. I took a sip of my drink, letting the tension stretch. I'm a journalist, Dad. This is what I do. My mother inhaled sharply through her nose, as if she was trying to maintain control of the situation. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, she said, her tone softer than my father's, but laced with something else, warning. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, I think I do. I tapped the folder. See, I knew you two were up to something, but I didn't realize just how deep it went. The fake accounts, the offshore transfers, the shell companies, it's all here. I tilted my head, watching them closely. How long have you been laundering money, huh? 5 years? 10. My father's nostrils flared. This isn't your concern. Not my concern? I repeated, my voice rising. You stole from me. You sold my goddamn car to manipulate me, and now you want to tell me this isn't my concern. I scoffed. I'd say it's very much my concern. Mira looked sick. You two are criminals. My mother's gaze flickered to her. Mira, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. Dramatic? Myra's voice shook. You launder money, you lie, you steal from your own son, and I'm the dramatic one? She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I knew the firm was shady, but this is disgusting. My father stood up too, his hands balling into fists at his sides. Sit down. Mira took a step back. No, I kept my eyes locked on my father. How much of this does Uncle Richard know? My father's lip curled in frustration. Richard has nothing to do with this. Bullshit. I leaned forward. He's in half these documents. I reached into the folder and pulled out an email I had printed, a direct communication between my father and his brother. And in case you try to deny it, I've got copies of all this stashed in more than one place. So if anything happens to me, I let the sentence dangle. My mother finally lost her composure. You're teaching your own family? I gave her a tight smile. No, Mom. I'm protecting myself from my family. For the first time in my life, I saw my father speechless. Mira turned to me, her expression unreadable. Jonas, what are you planning to do? I didn't answer her. Not yet. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing. I wasn't done with them yet. My father sat back down, slow and deliberate, like a man realizing he was just outplayed, but refusing to admit it. My mother's expression hardened, her fingers twitching against the stem of her wine glass as if she was resisting the urge to throw it. Mira was still standing, arms crossed, eyes darting between our parents and the folder like she was struggling to process just how deep their corruption ran. I tapped my fingers against the table, watching them. So, I said casually, who wants to start explaining? Neither of them spoke. Typical. My father inhaled deeply through his nose, the way he did when he was trying to control his temper. You don't understand the world you're playing in, Jonas. I raised an eyebrow. Is that so? This isn't just business, he continued. There are people involved who won't be as forgiving as we are. I snorted. Forgiving? I gestured toward the folder. You're sitting on years of financial crime, and you think you're in a position to talk about forgiveness? My mother reached out, pressing her perfectly manicured fingers against my father's wrist as if to calm him. Jonas, she said smoothly, you don't know what you've started. Oh, I know exactly what I've started, I countered. The real question is, do you? My father leaned forward, his voice low and controlled. You think you're untouchable because you're a journalist? Because you've stashed some files away? He shook his head. You don't have any idea who you're dealing with. That sent a ripple of unease through my spine, but I refused to let it show. Instead, I tilted my head and smirked. Sounds like a THRat. It's a warning, my mother corrected, her voice deceptively soft. I glanced at Mira. Her hands were clenched at her sides, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, fear, maybe. Or maybe realization. Who else knows? My father asked. I shrugged. Enough people. He exhaled sharply, but my mother was still watching me, calculating. Jonas, she said, and there was something in her tone that made me pause. Do you really want to burn this bridge? I let out a slow breath. You sold my car to force me into your business. You've been lying and stealing for years. You're trying to intimidate me into silence. I leaned in, locking eyes with her. What bridge is left to burn? For the first time that evening, my mother had no response. Mira suddenly laughed, a short, bitter sound. God, I can't believe I ever looked up to you too. She shook her head. You always told us the family name meant something. That integrity mattered. But it was all bullshit, wasn't it? Mira, my father said warningly. No, she shook her head. You don't get to control us anymore. I watched as my father's jaw tightened, his gaze darkening. He was losing control of the conversation, and he knew it. I let the silence stretch before I spoke again, voice even. You're going to tell me everything. Every single detail. Or I start making phone calls. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. My mother's expression didn't change, but I could see the gears turning in her mind. Finally, my father exhaled. You have no idea what you've just done. I smirked. Oh, I think I do. And just like that, the real game began. My father stared at me, his fingers still pressed against the folder like he was holding onto the last shred of control. My mother sat unnervingly still, her lips pressed into a thin line. I knew that look. It meant she was thinking, calculating. She wasn't the kind to panic. She was the kind to plan her next move before anyone else had even realized a game was being played. Mira had sunk back into her chair, arms folded tightly across her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. She kept shaking her head slightly, as if her brain was still rejecting what was right in front of her. Finally, my father broke the silence. How long have you been digging? I smirked. Long enough. His jaw flexed. Who else has seen this? People who would make your life very difficult if anything happens to me. I leaned back, arms crossed. So let's not waste time pretending you can make this go away with a few phone calls, okay? My mother finally spoke, her voice composed, smooth. You think this is simple? She reached out, tapping the folder lightly with a fingernail. You think you've uncovered something dangerous, and that by holding onto it you have power. But Jonas, she tilted her head slightly. You have no idea how deep this goes. I narrowed my eyes. Then enlighten me. She sighed, as if I was a child too naive to understand the weight of the situation. Carter and Company isn't just a law firm, she said. It's a foundation. A structure that's existed for decades, built on relationships and agreements that go far beyond our family. I frowned. What are you saying? My father answered instead. This isn't just about money, Jonas. There are people invested in this firm, people who don't take kindly to loose ends. A cold wave ran down my spine, but I didn't let it show. Loose ends. I repeated. You don't understand the kind of people who rely on us, my mother said. Or what happens when someone threatens to expose them. I leaned forward, placing my elbows on the table. Let me get this straight. You're telling me that Carter and Company is laundering money for people dangerous enough that they'd rather kill me than let this go public? Neither of them answered. That silence told me everything. Myra's breath hitched. Are you serious? Her voice trembled. You're involved with what? The mob? My father's expression darkened. Be careful what you say, Mira. Her chair scraped against the floor as she shot to her feet. Oh my God. Oh my God. She ran a hand through her hair, pacing the length of the dining room. This is insane. This is actually insane. I kept my focus on my parents. Who are they? My father exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. People who don't like being named. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're going to get, my mother said. For your own good. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, now you care about my well-being? She didn't rise to the bait. Mira stopped pacing and turned to me. Jonas, she whispered, voice tight with fear. If what they're saying is true, you can't publish this. I clenched my jaw. I'm not letting them get away with this. My father leaned forward, his voice low. You think you have control, but you don't. This isn't just about us, Jonas. If this goes public, the people above us, the ones who really run things, they won't care that you're family. They won't hesitate. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I had expected THROts. I had expected anger. I hadn't expected this. This wasn't just a family Sindal. This was bigger, deeper. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I had just backed my parents into a corner or if they had just backed me into one. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, like the walls were closing in on me. My father sat there, watching me with that cold, calculating expression, and my mother, always composed, remained eerily still. Mira stood frozen, her face pale, her fingers gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. This was worse than I had thought. I had uncovered the corruption, the fraud, the offshore accounts. I had pieced together the shell companies and the backdoor deals. But I had thought, naively, apparently, that this was just my parents being greedy, bending the law in their favor like they always had. I hadn't realized they were entangled in something bigger, something that could get me killed. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. So, let's say I drop this. Let's say I pretend I never found any of it. What happens then? My father studied me carefully before answering. Then we move forward. As a family. I scoffed. You mean I keep my mouth shut and you get to keep pretending you're respectable? You call it pretending, my mother said, smoothing the crease on her blouse. We call it survival. Mira let out a choked laugh. Survival? She shook her head in disbelief. You're not victims. You chose this. My father's jaw tightened. You think it's that simple? You think we woke up one day and decided, let's commit fraud, let's get in bed with powerful people, let's put everything on the line. He gestured to the folder. This isn't a choice, Mira. It's a necessity. I leaned back, arms crossed. Enlighten me. What exactly did you get yourselves into? My father hesitated, but my mother answered for him. Power is never clean, Jonas. And the people who really have it don't operate within the law. We simply assist. Assist who? I pressed. She ignored the question. We keep things running smoothly. We make sure certain problems disappear before they become public problems. I scoffed. So you're fixers now? Call it what you want, my father muttered. Mira shook her head. How far does this go? Neither of them answered immediately. My mother just gave us that cool, unreadable look, the one that had always made me uneasy growing up. Farther than you want to know. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I thought I had been in control, but the truth was, I had only uncovered one layer of something much larger. And I wasn't sure what terrified me more, the fact that my parents had been part of this for years, or the fact that they still didn't seem afraid. I licked my lips, voice quieter now. What happens if I say no? My father met my gaze. Then you won't live long enough to regret it. The room went silent. Mira gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. I stayed perfectly still, my heart pounding, my mind racing. He had just confirmed it. If I pushed forward with this, if I went public, I wouldn't just be ruining my parents. I would be putting a target on my back. I had stepped into something far more dangerous than I had anticipated. And now, I needed to figure out how the hell I was going to get out of it. I had two choices. Option 1, I could walk away, pretend I never found any of this, and live the rest of my life knowing that my parents were criminals, knowing that they had gotten away with it again. Or option 2, I could burn their entire empire to the ground. But if I was going to do it, I had to be smart. I took a slow, deep breath and forced myself to look at them like I was actually considering their offer. All right, I said. Let's say I back off. Let's say I do what you want. My mother gave me a small, satisfied smile. That would be wise. Mira turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. Jonas, I held up a hand, silencing her. One condition. My father frowned. You're in no position to make conditions. I smirked. You're the ones desperate for my silence. So, yeah, I am. I folded my arms on the table and leaned in. I want out. Completely. You cut me loose, no more control, no more interfering in my life. You don't get to tell me what to do, you don't get to pull strings, and you sure as hell don't get to sell my property again. My mother exhaled sharply through her nose, but my father stayed quiet, considering. I pressed my advantage. In fact, I want financial separation. If I'm really not a part of this world, then I shouldn't be tied to your money or your influence. I want nothing to do with Carter and company legally, financially, or professionally. Mira shot me a look, but I gave her the smallest nod. She didn't know what I was planning, but she trusted me enough to stay quiet. My father was watching me closely. You're asking for independence. I'm demanding it, I corrected. He tapped his fingers against the table, thinking. Then he gave a curt nod. Fine. I blinked. That was too easy. Fine. You want out? You're out, he said simply. We'll draft the paperwork. You'll no longer be tied to Carter and company in any way. My mother narrowed her eyes, like she suspected there was more to my request. And the folder? I smiled. It disappears. Mira stiffened beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. I knew she wouldn't like it, but I needed my parents to believe I was backing down. My mother finally relaxed, shoulders easing. My father sat back in his chair, the tension in his jaw loosening. They thought they had won. Good. Because the real game was only just starting. The next week, the paperwork arrived. A full legal separation. I was officially untethered from the family business. No financial ties, no legal obligations. I was, for the first time in my life, free. I signed it without hesitation. And then, I put the rest of my plan into motion. First, I sent copies of the folder to a trusted investigative journalist, one who wasn't me. Someone who had no connection to my family, no bias, no emotional baggage. Someone who would dig deeper than I ever could. Then, I made sure the SEC and IRS got their hands on the financial records. Not through me, of course. I had no interest in being the face of this takedown. But there were plenty of anonymous whistleblowing methods. And my parents? They had made plenty of enemies over the years, people who would love nothing more than to see them fall. It didn't take long. The investigations were swift. The media coverage was relentless. Carter and Company collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. Clients fled. Investors pulled out. The firm was exposed for exactly what it was, a front for financial crimes far deeper than anyone had realized. And my parents? They weren't arrested, not yet anyway. But their power? Their influence? Gone. Every connection they had spent decades building turned against them the moment they became a liability. The people they had once assisted cut ties without hesitation. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to make sure the truth came out. And the world took care of the rest. Mira and I sat on the hood of my new car, watching the news coverage from my phone. They really thought they could get away with it, she murmured, shaking her head. They always do, I said. She exhaled. You think they know it was you? I smirked. Oh, they know. Mira glanced at me. You don't regret it? I thought about it for a second. Then I shook my head. No, for the first time in my life, I wasn't just Jonas Carter, son of Walter and Diane Carter. I wasn't under their thumb. I was free. And that was worth everything.